Hey, what's going on? What's happening? Greetings to everybody. This your girl Tiffany here, live in effect. And tonight, subject is going to be about Black people in the Civil War. And I have a guest coming on, so I'm waiting for him to come through. So while I'm in the middle of waiting on him, I hope everybody enjoying their Ramadan right now. I know some of y'all just got done fasting or whatnot, so you guys probably breaking y'all fast around this time. And then I hope you guys also enjoy your Juma for those of you that went to the service today. So yes, I wanted to talk about the Civil War for a minute because people have to really understand Black folks playing their role in the Civil War. All right, so let's give a breakdown of what was really going on behind the Civil War movement. So it was a case of you had the Union and the Confederate. So at one time, the South was a part of the Union, but the South wanted to keep slavery because that's what helped build up the economics. And the Union said we don't need slavery anymore because we got other ways to make money. We don't need slavery. Let's abolish slavery. So the South said, nah, you know what? We're gonna keep it over here and we just gonna separate ourselves. So it's two different type of Americas. You had the Union, which represented the United States of America, right? That was the northern states. And then you had the South representing the Confederate States of America. Now, the West Coast was still like the territories, all right, majority of it. So it was like some of it was unterritorial, meaning that, the land was purchased, but it wasn't claimed yet. And then some of them, they were just, they was coming into existence, okay? So, but basically, the northern states, right, and the southern states were the main ones. Now you gotta remember, before there was 13 colonies, which was consist of Carolina, Virginia, Georgia. Let's see, New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, just to name a few. Right, so you had the 13 colonies. So around this time, yeah, slavery was abolished in the early 1800s, but there was people who were still bringing slaves here in this country. So they were bringing slaves over here illegally. All right. And with that being the case, because the South did not want to give up slavery, that's what brought about the war. And also they wanted to look at, well, who was going to have total control over this land, which we know now is the federal government. Is it going to be the North that's going to be running the government system, or is it going to be the South that's going to be running the federal government? And unfortunately, the South lost against the North. All right. And they had to become a union. And then also, the South was upset because Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. And Abraham Lincoln didn't want to go about bringing slavery or expanding slavery. He didn't want to do that. So the South was upset. The South was mad. Y'all got a Republican in the office, and this man wanted to expand slavery. I mean, this man wanted to get rid of slavery. He wanted to abolish slavery. What? Why? We don't want no Republican in the office. Now, a lot of people don't know about the dirty history behind the Democratic Party. A lot of Black folks who jump on the Democratic bandwagon, they don't really know the history. The Democratic Party was not in your favor. So to all the Black folks out there who are Democrats, and y'all talk bad about the Republicans, right? Which y'all can, and y'all have the right to do so now, because a lot of them just don't give a shit, you know what I mean? But if you look back in the history of slavery, the Republicans was the ones that was trying to fight against slavery. They were the ones that stood up and said, no, we're not going to expand it. And I'm not saying that the Republicans were our people friend or anything like that, but they stood up against it. The Democrats wanted to keep slavery around. So if you look at the history of the Republican Party, it came into existence when Abraham Lincoln got into the office. And the Democrat Party came into existed when Andrew Andrew Jackson was president. So the Democratic Party wanted to keep slavery around. And guess what else exists under the Democratic Party? The Ku Klux Klan. And the Democratic Party was not going to allow black people to come in and be part of the political system. Nope. They were not going to allow that. Black people could not become Democrats until what, around the late 60s? But see, a lot of black folks don't know that history. But see, you get a lot of confirmation bias when it comes to that. If you guys could give me one moment, because I want to find out what the guest is at, and then I can get on to the subject matter. All right, so while I'm waiting, but the Democratic Party was not going to give black people a chance. They weren't trying to. And most black folks during that period, right, during the Reconstruction era, the Civil War period, right, a lot of them became Republicans. And they were former slaves because it was the only political party that was going to give them the opportunity at that time. So we were taught to believe that the Republican Party was always a bad political party for us as a people. That the Republican Party were just evil people. They were the bad guys. But if you go back into history, they weren't as bad as you think. Not saying that I advocate for them now. I'm not saying that you got to jump on board, because I still believe that as people of color, we should create our own political system. But what you get is a lot of confirmation bias when it comes to historical information. And what happened is we have been infantilized to believe certain things. We have been taught that, oh, the Democrats are going to represent the poor people. And now, to my knowledge, they got this thing going on with this whole boycotting, supposedly, with Target. I guess that's something that Al Sharpton and Pastor Jamal Bryant came up with. But then let me ask you this: how can you make that possible when there are people who work at places like Target, that's our color, and then you got black business owners who have items and products inside of Target? So how can you go about, one moment, but how can't you go about boycotting Target when you don't have a backup plan for the community? What's the backup plan? What's the solution? What is the solution for the community? Because a lot of we don't have as many adequate resources as our white counterparts. We don't have the means of production. We don't own the means of production. So how can't you say, well, let's go boycott a place like Target, knowing that that's where people are gonna have to shop when they need resources? Because it's not many black Targets out there. It's not a black Walmart out there. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of black business owners are struggling to try to keep their business around. So these are the same people. So people like Al Sharpton and Jamal Bryant, but particularly Al Sharpton, you have to watch out for. Because it's the same guy that's going to lead you down into the path to go and protest, right? Or boycott something. But then at the same time, he ain't going to give you no type of resources. He's not going to give you any type of backup solution. And this man is a millionaire. He identifies as a Democrat. But he ain't going to create jobs or anything of that nature. But yet still, they want you to boycott. He's not going to help those people who working at Target and try to cover up their income. Nah, he's not going to do that. He's not going to help pay their bills. He is what you call a counter-revolutionary. And a lot of people look at it as a joke, which they are in their right to do so. They are. So let me find out where the guest is at, and I will come back to you guys. What's up? What's going on, brother Kudjoe? You finally made it, didn't you? Kudjoe? Kudjoe? You gotta unmute yourself. Can't you hear me? Maybe. Hold on. Let me see. Hold on. Hold on. Kudjoe, can't you hear me? I can't hear you. Oh, something going on with your sound there. Can't you hear me? Oh, okay. All right. So, he's going to come back. I don't know what's going on. Something's going on with the sound, but let me see.
Me now.
Hey,
Yeah, you
I
hear me
can't hear
now?
you. Let's see what's going on here. Let me see something. I'm trying to figure out why I can't hear you. All right. Are you there, Cujo?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Okay.
You
Yeah,
can.
we had some
Yeah,
technical difficulty. Okay,
you had
okay.
to put the
Welcome.
Bluetooth back on. Good evening.
Welcome back. Welcome back. It's been a minute.
Not bad.
It's been a minute. Welcome back.
Yeah, it has been. It has been a minute.
Yes, it has. It has. I appreciate you coming through.
No
So
doubt.
so the topic, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about black people in the Civil War. And I'm glad to have my brother here because I want to be able to get into the subject matter. So basically, um, I was basically talking to them about, the whole, just giving the lay down what the history of the Civil War was really about. And
Hmm.
basically, it was just about the South wanted to keep slavery, the North wanted to abolish slavery, and the North was the Union, and the South was the Confederate. And because the South wanted to keep slavery, it brought about the war. And then
Yeah,
also the South was upset because Lincoln became president and he was a Republican and he wanted to abolish the slave expansion.
yeah.
And
It was more about the expansion of the slave trade as
mhm,
opposed to like whether the slave trade began or ended. I mean, whether they didn't fight to necessarily keep. They didn't fight to end slavery, but they certainly fought to keep slavery. You see what I mean? That the South definitely fought to keep slavery. They seceded because Lincoln was elected president. As a matter of fact, not one single Southern state. He didn't win one single Southern state in that particular ballot in 1800. He didn't win one Southern state at all, and he wasn't even on the ballot in Mississippi or South Carolina. But he still won. Due to the electoral college and all that shit, he still managed to win. The problem with the South, I mean, Lincoln, he was a low key abolitionist. He was like kind of cool with abolitionists, but that wasn't his primary focus. Like I know people always like to point out, he's like, if I could save the Union by freeing zero slaves, I would free zero. If I had to free some, I would free some. His primary focus was to save the Union. But the South went to war because we got to understand how the United States was expanding at the time. You know what I'm saying? The United States had just acquired Texas, and when Texas came into the picture, it made the voting block with the Senate off, where you had more southern states than you had northern states, so that would throw off the vote. You know, so in order to maintain that, they created a new state in the north and called it Maine. And this like right, after the Missouri Compromise. That's a really big deal. Missouri Compromise, bleeding Texas. There's a lot of things that led up to the Civil War. It wasn't, like one factor, but it was certainly the South want to maintain its slave economy. We got to understand that it wasn't so much like we think of slavery. and we think of, free labor. But the most lucrative commodity at the time, from in nearly the entire 1800 period, between 1790 actually, between 1790 and 1865, the most lucrative commodity in the United States was slaves. Slaves were more valuable than cotton. Slaves were used as money. Human beings were used as money. Human beings were used as collateral. But it was money backed up in it. It wasn't just slave masters, or, like, I'd rather say, planters. It wasn't just planters making money because of the products they grew on their particular plantations. There was entire industry behind slavery. You see what I'm saying? Um, it was no, it was no one thing. You had an entire industry. You had an industry that came from the Northeast, supplying food. You know what I'm saying? Then, because um, grain commodities aren't as labor intensive as cotton, tobacco, and the other commodities coming out of the South. So that grain that a lot of the people in the South ate, not just slaves, but the grain in general, came from northern granaries. You had a fishing industry in Massachusetts that provided, and they went as far as Jamaica providing fish, cod, different types of fish. I think like Adkins saltfish. That fish is not even that fish, for instance, is not even native to Jamaica. You know what I'm saying? It's brought from somewhere else. But anyway, um, the saltfish part. But yeah, but it was a whole lot of factors leading up to the Civil War. You had John Brown's insurrection. You had, really, even if you go as far back as Nat Turner, and that's in the 1830s. So it was a lot leading up to it. But basically, it was a bunch of money, and you had these Southern planters who wanted to expand their business. Once California came on the scene in the 1840s, and you had the California gold rush in 1849, you had Southern speculators wanting to move slavery into California to work in them gold mines. Had that happened, I doubt if slavery would have ended anytime. Anytime, I mean, until recently, maybe, to be honest.
Hmm.
If the Southern states were able to acquire California as a slave state. And it wasn't some philanthropy. It's not like the North was like some philanthropic kingdom that cared about the rights of black people, and
Right.
Republicans were the
Right.
big guys. And, no, it was more, um, when you have slavery, what you do is you upset the balance because poor people can't work. It's similar to, like, if you go to Walmart. Walmart is bigger, so things are cheaper, as opposed to going to a local store. Walmart's going to always win out. We got to understand, entire towns that exist now exist because of the slave trade, or exist because of the money made in the area. A place like Natchez, Mississippi, you know what I'm saying? A place like Memphis, to be quite honest. A place like Memphis and Atlanta. The thing that popped Atlanta off was the cotton industry and the railroad system. You create a river, so much, so to speak, and it just, by creating the railroad tracks. You know what I mean? So that's what made Atlanta blow up. But a lot of those places developed around plantation towns. So it was a lot that went into it. It's not as simple as, or they fought for slave, or they fought, was the war about slavery? Of course it was, but it was about, the economy. So it's bigger than just, owning a man. Like, it was more about, you had people who made clothing for slaves. I forget the name of the place, but it's a Sears and Roebuck type. If y'all remember Sears and Roebuck, God, I keep forgetting that shit going. But like different, they made that, it was a clothing industry behind slaves. It was, and then the actual selling of the slaves themselves, that was a high commodity. That was a big money maker. Like,
So let me
Natchez,
ask.
Mississippi wouldn't exist without the slave trade.
Oh yeah,
Richmond.
most definitely, because slavery was a big economy here. It was the most important part. So, the more slaves you have, the more profit that you're looking to get. And then people don't know, like, the cotton. The cotton industry. That's like what $1 trillion industry, if I'm
Yeah,
not
cotton was
mistaken.
king. That was our main export. And in 1792, that's when the cotton gin was first the cotton gin was patented in 1792. Eli Whitney. And believe it or not, Eli Whitney thought that the cotton gin would end slavery. He believed that it would end slavery because he thought that by requiring less people to actually, process, because what the cotton gin does, what the cotton engine does, that's what it really called, is
Mm-hmm.
pull the seeds out of the cotton instead of somebody having to do it by hand, so he can do it a lot quicker. So he
Mm-hmm.
thought that that would, make the need for slaves less than what it was. But what he had no idea of was there's this area in Southern Virginia, northwestern North Carolina, that starts in this area and it extends all the way to damn near Texas, called the Black Belt. Like they had no idea that area was so rich in nutrients. You know what I mean? Because they had originally like let them Indians stay in Western Georgia. You know
Mm.
what? They was the Cherokees was still in Western Georgia. They was large. So, but what the Cherokee did was they jumped on it. They jumped on that plantation system, and they became pretty goddamn rich. And then you had your what's the name? On the $20 bill. What's his name on the $20 bill?
Uh, that's Andrew Jackson.
Jackson.
Yes.
Andrew
So,
Jackson.
and speaking of that, all right, can because I was talking about the history of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And
Yeah.
you know how all the time we're being told to vote Democrat, and Democrat Party
Hmm.
represent us, etc. Right? But
Hmm.
what people don't really understand that there's a horrifying history behind the Democratic Party. And can
Yeah.
we really go into like how the Democrats supported slavery and
Hmm.
how they did not want black people to be involved, and also the Ku Klux Klan?
Yeah, Democrats they didn't want at that particular time. But the Democrats, that's just the name of the organization. They were the conservative branch of government. And that's what we miss in that argument. When people say stuff like, you had a party switch, it wasn't necessarily a party switch. You had a ideology switch between the parties. One party became the conservative party and the other party became the liberal party. But that's just the name of the shit. You see what I'm saying? But the
Mm-hmm.
Klan came up. The Klan had its original jump. They popped the first time, like right after the Civil War, with your boy Nathan Bedford Forrest from Tennessee. He started that original Klan, and I forget the president and Roosevelt. One of them, he actually dismantled the Klan completely. He dismantled it. It wasn't until your boy Woodrow Wilson from the Commonwealth, from the Commonwealth of Virginia, when he became the president. Like during World War I, or in the early 1900s, when the whole birth of the nation thing took place, and that's when the Klan really blew up. The Klan had existed like right after slavery. It it was a terrorist organization meant to, for these boys coming home. The South really was pretty much destroyed during the Civil War. Everywhere, and this is something interesting too. Something that's now been talked about. Everywhere, like Richmond was burned to the ground. Atlanta, of course, you know that Atlanta was burnt to the ground. Um, Memphis, New Orleans got bombarded, but Texas remained unscathed. And to this day, Texas is one of the mightier, industries. You know what I'm saying? Economies rather in the country, and one of the more influential areas in the country, and certainly in the South. But Texas remained unscathed because it didn't have a lot of you know shit to actually destroy its infrastructure. So Texas emerged differently. But the Klan came right after the emancipation thing, right after the Civil War. You had all some of these people coming home from the Confederate Army, and to be quite honest, they had lost some of them had lost everything, like literally everything. And they just was disgruntled, and you gonna blame the person. You just blamed us. We just became the scapegoat. The same way we use now as a pawn politically, we were used then. We were a unifying factor because, like, as you know, your boy Grant had issued a thing about the 40 acres and a mule, and I know that was in the news, people talking about it and shit. You know, that 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 was a real thing. That was a real thing. You know, and so these plantations were supposed to be given to these emancipated people. But what ended up happening is poor white people took over got those same parcels of land, and they still own them to this day. They still own them to this day. But the Klan, they were just disgruntled boys, and they was getting there, raping women. It's kind of messed up, because we focus on slavery. When we talk about slavery, we often focus on the bad things. Wait a sec, I gotta change the battery on my earpiece. Give me a second, give me a second, give me a second.
Okay. All right. All right, you guys. So while he's
Am I back? Can you hear me?
yes.
All right, yeah, my bad, my bad.
Yes, you good, you good. So now let's get into how black people end up getting involved in the Civil War. As far as like serving as as far as like the regiments party,
Mhm.
well not the parties, the different, soldier groups like the regiments, um and what made them decide that hey, this will be the best thing for us, like if we serve in the
When
Civil War.
there were blacks trying to serve before the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, but after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, uh, black Americans went full throttle to join the various regiments, the various color regiments at the time. And just to dispel one of the myths that people talk about a lot of times, they talk a lot about the Confederates having black soldiers. That's an absolute lie. That's an absolute lie. In Richmond, we have this museum called the Valentine Museum, and it's this guy. He's all over YouTube. He calls himself a Black Confederate, and he sits out there every day with a bunch of other people with Confederate galleon and all that stuff. I see him. If you ride in there, you'll see him anytime. But
So you saying that the Confederates never had black soldiers, only the
no, they did
Union?
not. Not officially. No, they did not. They
But
did
there
not.
were black people that was in the Confederate, but they was not the
Yeah,
official.
they were normally there or the bequest of their owner. But there were people hired out. There were people within the Confederate lines who were black, who served as porters and stewards and they call it a body man, and did other menial tasks, in their particular force and stuff. Yes, but there were no soldiers. There were no black Confederate soldiers. They actually started a regiment in 1863 in Chimborazo Park in Richmond, Virginia, but they never saw any battle and they never even had actual guns. But they were training to have a colored regiment in the South because I forget the name of it. I should have done that. I really thought we was doing this tomorrow, so I apologize. But it's always
Uh,
good regardless.
nah, it's
No,
okay.
it's all,
So
I work my work schedule all over the place. But you have people. I have, as a matter of fact, I have like three ancestors who left Virginia and went to Massachusetts to fight, you know. So quite a few people. That was the escape route, that's one way to escape, you know what I'm saying? Um, and you want to fight for your freedom. I mean, that's who really fought for freedom. No question. You know what I'm saying? If anyone fought for the freedom of black people, it's the black people who joined the Union cause. And it's about 200,000 people. So several of our ancestors were in it. I also have ancestors who were complicit on the Confederate side. Excuse me, they were Indians.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they had to sign up saying that they never helped how they were forced to build a bridge by the Confederate soldiers. I read the whole court documents, but yeah, but it was a, it was something that I wanted to say because I don't like when people make up all this stuff about the Civil War. But
Well,
go ahead,
now
ask me something else.
I
It
want to
make me talk.
say this. So the other night I did a video about Nicholas Said. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with him? Nicholas Said?
Yeah, Fulani.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Is he? I don't think. No. No.
That's the
No.
one that went back, right?
Yeah, he was the well,
Yeah.
he was the one that traveled. He was the one that traveled. He didn't have ancestors that was enslaved here in America,
Okay,
but
nah, I'm
he
not sure. Tell me about it. Go ahead.
okay.
I'm not sure.
So his name was Muhammad Ibn Said. Actually, that was his name, but he went by the name of Nicholas Said. He was from the Borno Empire. The Borno Empire
Borno.
is
Hmm.
yeah, which is at that time was considered to be Bilal al Sudan. You
Bel
know,
Air, Sudan. Yeah. So, but
yeah,
it's in
yeah,
modern day
Bilal al
Cameroon.
Sudan, which means the
Yes.
land of the
Chad.
black. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So yeah, over there in Chad area, and it's part of Nigeria, and then part of
Hmm.
Cameroon, and all that, like
Yeah.
that little region, Central Africa.
Yeah.
So he was from a town called, if I'm saying, I might mispronounce it.
This
It's
tries.
it's is it Kaku? Kaku, I think that's how it's pronounced.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but during his time period, right,
Hmm.
he was born into the time when they still had the trans-Saharan slave trade going on.
Right.
And what people don't know, that the trans-Saharan slave trade was still taking place during the transatlantic slave trade.
Yes.
Yeah,
And after.
it was still happening. And so he happened to end up becoming a slave in the Ottoman Empire, right? Because he was
Uh-huh.
sent over there to Turkey.
Oh, you
Then,
talking about dude that went to Russia?
yeah, he went to Russia.
Yeah, I know you talking about. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a very interesting story. Yeah,
Hmm.
you have people trying to say that he was a retrain, but he wasn't a retrain. You talking
No, no,
about
no, he wasn't. No, 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 no,
Pushkin's
no.
grandfather, right?
No, and he
Alexander
even
Pushkin.
written an autobiography.
Yeah, yeah, I read it. I know exactly what you're talking about. I didn't know. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, that's a very Gannibal. They called him Gannibal. They called him
Oh,
Gannibal. Yeah, that's what they called him Gannibal. That's what the Russians called him. Yeah,
oh,
he
wow.
yeah, Gannibal with
Yeah,
a G instead of a H. Yeah, yeah, he was. That's a very that is certainly movie worthy. You know what I'm saying? It's movie worthy because movies concentrate on individuals. But that's I think our problem when we look at slavery sometimes is we focus on the individual instead of the group dynamic and instead of how it affected the group. But that is a fascinating story. Yeah, the
yeah,
Russians
because
didn't have, they didn't participate in the transatlantic slave trade
who?
outright. The
The
Russians,
Russian? No,
yeah,
no, no, no,
outright.
no,
They
no,
did
no,
not.
no, no. They didn't. But he worked over there as a servant too.
Yeah,
I
he did.
guess, it was similar to how he was dealing with slavery over there in Turkey, but the only
At the
difference
time,
was,
it was fashionable in Europe to have handmaidens and body servants. That's what I meant to say. Body
Mhm.
servants, young men. You see it in a lot of the pictures of royalty around Europe in the 18th, 17th, in the 18th and 19th centuries. You see a lot of the pictures and how the bond service. So it was a popular thing. It was more of a novelty thing with um with Gannibal. It was more of a novelty thing. But he was he well learned the language and became a prominent person in the Russian army.
right. He
He,
learned multiple languages, and he also served in the army here in America. He served during the time of
hmm
the Civil War.
Yeah, yup. Yeah, dang, I forgot about that. Yup.
Yeah, he did. He served in the
Yeah,
time during the Civil War. I think he was in Massachusetts at that time.
yeah.
Yeah, he was
Wow.
part of a regiment in Massachusetts. I
I
think it
think
was
it's the
called the
54th.
66th Regiment.
The what you said was? I know the 54th was the largest one.
I think it was the 66th Regiment.
Okay.
It was, but I know it was in Massachusetts.
Okay.
I know for a fact that it was in Massachusetts. That's where he was at. Um, and so he was serving, yeah, in the
Yeah, he married an American
Union.
woman and everything.
Yep, he
He married a
surely
woman
did.
and
He
everything.
did.
Yeah.
But
Sure
then the
did. Yeah.
interesting part about it, he never mentioned that in his autobiography.
Oh, for real.
Yeah, he didn't really
Yeah.
mention about him serving in the military for whatever personal reason. Who knows? Um, it was a lot of stuff because he didn't. I guess he didn't want to make his book a long story, and so he tried to shorten it up. So he traveled to places like Georgia, and I think he done traveled to
Yeah.
Alabama. Yep, he went to Haiti. He done went to Canada. He went all over. He was in Detroit teaching at one time. He was teaching the language French.
Wow.
So
Yeah, you
yeah. So
still had a large French enclave in Detroit.
say again.
You had a lot of French speakers still living in Detroit, in Michigan. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? That
because
was
it's right there at right there
it's
by
right
Canada.
there.
Because
Yeah, the
Canada's
United
right
States
across
actually
the
lost
river.
Detroit, the
Huh?
War of 1812. The United States had actually lost Detroit during the War of 1812.
For
The
real?
British had taken it over. Yeah, the War
Mm.
of 1812. The way we learn about it is like the United States won. No, no one really won. They just no one gained anything. They did burn down the White House, and they burnt down the White House, and the people that burnt down the White House were said to be uh, black black Marines from the British regiment. Blacks who had joined the regiment in order to be free. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? When they came, blacks went. And that's why in the Star Spangled Banner, that part that's taken out, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about because when DC was burned and when Baltimore was attacked and when Francis Scott Key was looking out of the prison when the harbor was being destroyed, and he wrote the Star Spangled Banner, there were black soldiers where they were, part of a Marine regiment coming off of the British ships attacking, the area. So in that part, neither fledgling nor slave or whatever. The part of they talk about it a lot. The part of the the national anthem that is no longer sang. It's a third verse. But that's why the slave thing is in there. It's like context. It wasn't just written arbitrarily. It was written because slaves were leaving the plantations to join the British, the same way slaves left the plantation to join the Union. It was all about, the individual. These people wanted their freedom, at whatever cost. But that's the thing, like before the antebellum era,
Mhm.
before the Civil War, you had a lot of propaganda coming out of the South saying that how the slaves were content and happy. You know what I mean? And that everybody was the Steven character from Django. That it was more of them than it was people who was like say Django or that's a highly fictionalized character, but you know what I mean. But the idea they were actually selling that in Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe actually brought like slavery to the forefront of the landed gentry of the North. It really was a it became a beacon used to anti-slavery beacon. That book itself, viewed by the North. You know what I'm saying? The Union, the way they viewed slavery, because the propaganda that they were told it was like the blacks were content. So the main populace, didn't probably never thought about it at all. But that book kind of brought a lot of what was going on in the South to the
Mhm.
forefront. And Um, because when Harriet Beecher Stowe traveled to the South, she saw slave coffles. And people, if you live above the Mason-Dixon line, that was something you wouldn't see at all. But she went to the South during the time of the domestic slave trade, which was from 1790 to 1860, where more than 800,000 people were sold from the upper South to the lower. You understand what I'm saying? And she
Yeah.
witnessed those couples. And at times, these couples could be hundreds of miles long. And they will walk out of Virginia through the Cumberland Gap to Tennessee, all the way to Memphis, get on a ship in Memphis and sail down to Natchez or all the way to New Orleans. Or they will march to places like Richmond or Norfolk and sail from those places, from the James River or from the Chesapeake Bay, sail around Florida to New Orleans. New Orleans was the largest repository of enslaved Africans coming from the United States, between 1790 and 1860. So like 1802 to 1860. New Orleans.
Wow.
That yeah. So and this is why, we have, insofar as us being a people in the United States, why we have these nuances and things in common, is because we literally come from the same people. You did have Africans who were still brought into the Gulf states, Mississippi, Biloxi. You still had Africans that was brought directly from Africa as well as from the Caribbean islands. But Africa, it was illegal, and
Mhm.
from the Caribbean islands, it was illegal as well. And again, this prohibition of the trade, it wasn't some philanthropic thing. You just ruined it. No big deal. It wasn't a philanthropic thing. This thing that about like prohibiting the slave trade. It was put into the Constitution in 1782 that slavery, that the importation of Africans would end in 25 years. And it did. But none of them could possibly see the advances in technology like the cotton gin. They didn't know that these newly acquired lands of with Western Georgia, because initially, gold was found in Western Georgia. That was the initial jump for Georgia. But Georgia kind of um, still was hugging South Carolina at that point. It didn't go down as far as Atlanta, like early on. It was Savannah, the port in Savannah, and all the way up through Tennessee to what modern Tennessee is. And in that area, they actually found gold. So you had a rush of people moving into that area because of the gold, and then later with the cotton. It's a fascinating history. You know what I'm saying? But we all too often we just lump it up, you know, and we don't give it the proper discipline study that I think it requires to understand, how those phenomenon affect us now. You
Right.
feel me? You know what I'm saying? We
Right.
kind of like
And
write it
so
off.
going back to what you were saying about people basically having this narrative that the slaves or the former slaves were content after the Civil War.
Oh, yeah, it
Can
was
you
terrible.
get into the whole thing of like what really happened afterward? Because what people don't know is
Mm.
that there was those who end up being homeless and they had nowhere else to go and they
Like
couldn't go to certain
when you
areas.
listen
Talk
to
about
some
the
of the
black
slave
code and stuff like that.
we listen to some of the slave narratives, like what dude describe it as we were let out. Like you let out. We don't really understand this because we're a few generations off the farm. But when you got cattle, when you raise cattle, you can simply let them out the gate and let them graze on their own, and they'll come back. And that's how he described emancipation. They just let us out, like with nothing. You had nothing. You had the Freedmen's Bureau that did form within the first 12 years, the only 12 years of Reconstruction. You had effort by the United States to try to assimilate the formerly enslaved population into the country. But with the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and Andrew Johnson coming into office, Andrew Johnson was he was a Democrat, he was a Southern sympathizer, and everything went to shit. He allowed the South to pretty much keep and maintain their power, but they were let out without nothing for the most part. You have certain families that can continue to work on certain plots of land, like it happened in my family. On my battle side, my grandmother's side, on both of her parents, Hans and Battle, they worked the land that they had previously been enslaved on. In time, Rufus Battle, grandfather, I think three-time great grandfather, he uh, acquired, a few plots of land that he worked off, and then they formed a church, and they formed a township in Scotland Neck, North Carolina, and this township would become part of Enfield. Enfield is the city around that area, but it was these people who had nothing, and they built a lot of their semblance around a church, and that's why I'm not too big in opposition to the black church, so to speak. I mean,
Right.
any organization has its issue. However, we cannot ignore that any type of semblance that we once had as a community after emancipation was due to growing up around that church, because that was like the center point of the community. But
Exactly. And see, people don't understand that. People are so quick to making criticism saying that, oh, because people fall into the concept of believing in God or taking
yeah,
on the European, ideology version of God or whatnot, and believing that that's what destroyed the family, that what destroyed the community in general. Not necessarily. It's not
right.
necessarily that case because you have to remember these when our people came over here to this land called America, right? They could not practice the custom that they were taught in the beginning.
Hmm.
As far as their cultural practice, their cultural tradition. So they took what was given to them, or what they were exposed to, and they created something around it. People don't talk about the hoodoo. People don't look
Yeah.
at voodoo or any other spiritual system that our people have created. You
Or
know what I'm
what
saying?
we did
People
with
don't talk about the
Christianity.
praise house.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
I
saying?
mean, it's all a part.
Invisible shirt,
It's all about, honestly, it's all
rain
about
shout. I'm sorry. Go
subconsciously.
ahead.
It's about us trying to distance ourselves from these ancestors that we claim we um look up to. You know, we look at it with shame, not realizing that if you live in a situation and you believe in God, so what? It's the white man's God too. You know, like it would be everybody's God. You know, and in Christianity, it is a religion of hope. You know, I will say that because it gives you an idea of an afterlife. You know what I'm saying? That you know that there will be a reckoning. So it was used as a coping mechanism, and that's what we all do. That's what we
Right,
always do now. You
right,
know, we believe in certain conventions to make us feel more comfortable about ourselves. So we can't sit around and down people. You know what I'm saying? And like you said, I mean, we don't begin to understand the sheer amount of people that 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 went on to become us as a people. You know, like you get in the argument with some of these Indian claimants, they'll be like, name your African ancestor. I mean, you don't descend from one person in Africa.
right,
You descend from several people in Africa. You
right.
don't
And
descend from
then
one person. And no, and they didn't all come at one time. You know what I'm saying?
exactly.
This is not Jamaica. See, Jamaica was different. The Caribbean islands was different because you could have a whole shipload of people get off in the Caribbean and they could go to two or three different plantations. Where you get off in Annapolis, Maryland, you could go somewhere in Maryland and you can go to Baltimore, you can go to Spotsylvania County, Virginia, you can go to uh, all over Virginia. You see what I'm saying? You could go to Delaware and you would be going to plantation not as a boatload, but as single people or one or two people here, one or two people there. You know, it's so you get a lot of these traditions get kind of lost in the sauce. You know, but that's the thing that New Orleans was able to do by bringing all these Africans who were in the Upper South, bringing them down to the the Gulf region with these some of these blacks who had already been there. This is another interesting thing about the Civil War. There was a black regiment in the Civil War in New Orleans who actually signed up to fight for the Confederacy, but they were never allowed to mobilize. And these were people who likely descended from former French aristocrats in the area, landed gentry, people who owned land. They owned slaves themselves, but they were a mixed caste. Whereas you didn't have that in numbers in the American context of slavery. You had small remnants of it in Virginia. You had it like in place in Charleston County, Virginia, where you had a mulatto, called it Charity Town. You had a mulatto community, mixed community. Um, and you also had one in Charleston, South Carolina, and
Mm.
probably even enclaves of them in Savannah. But certainly those older small those southern towns like that, and in Florida as well. Initially in Florida, you know, when Florida became part of the Union, because Florida, it's this woman, I cannot remember her name, but she was a Wolof and she was enslaved in Africa, sold in South Carolina, bought by some guy who had land in Florida, eventually became his husband. He died. She took over the land and the estate, and she had to leave the United States in order to keep her land. You know what I'm saying? They have to pay other people proxy to run her shit, but she was an African woman. You know,
Oh,
so
so she had to
it's
leave the United States in order to keep her land.
yeah. Yeah, in order, you know, because they were trying to confiscate her land from her because they were saying because she was black, she couldn't, you know, have the land. So she, you know, went the legal route and had the land co-signed by some Spanish guy, you know, in order to keep the land. She went to Haiti, but she eventually came back. She died in Florida. Forget her name. I gotta look it up again. That's a fact. That's a fascinating story too. Yeah, but
All
she
right,
ended up going to Haiti. She ended up going to Haiti, but she was a wolf. She was from Senegal.
for real?
You know, so there's a
Wow,
lot of
I never
things.
know about that story. I
Yeah,
never heard about this story.
I gotta look up her name. I gotta. I'm not. That's. I just have a problem with like writing stuff down, and I have a terrible problem with names. But
Okay, so we have some comments on here. So somebody put the Civil War ended before General Robert E. Lee could have then fight for the Confederate.
what? It ended in Appomattox. I forget the name of the house in Virginia when Robert E. Lee signed it. Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant signed the conditions of surrender. That was in Appomattox Church, Virginia. But I guess I think the way they're trying to say it, Robert E. Lee had concessions about fighting for the Confederacy because he like most Confederate generals was trained in at West Point. West Point, up north. You know what I'm saying? So, he felt that he was going against, his nation, and but him being a Virginian, and that's something we don't really get, especially even black folk in Virginia. We don't understand these how the dynamic with whites is a little different here. The way they look at stuff is a little different. Like, they really do look at themselves as the cream of the crop, to the point that they would look down on like Mississippi or Georgia, look down on it because they look at in North Carolina, like one of the things the white folks, they really down North Carolina, like because it's just the people who couldn't make it in Virginia, and that's how they look at Tennessee too. That's how the money. I mean, it's not like I've never heard poor white say it, but I certainly heard ones with money talk like that because they were the ones who that was the home of the presidents at the time. Woodrow Wilson was the last president to come out of Virginia, but prior to that point. Virginia still has the most presidents, but that's why Washington D.C. is in Washington D.C. That's why it's located where it's located. You know, because at that time the nation's origins were recognized to be in the South, but after the Civil War, we started focusing more on the focus was more on Plymouth Rock and all that shit. So when you think of the founding of the nation, we think Plymouth Rock. But in reality, that was just a band of some outlaws and a few pilgrims. Um, Jamestown was the founding of the country. You know what I'm saying? Jamestown was the founding of the country. But in order, the propaganda from the North, during the Civil War, was the focus to be the United States has its origins in the North, when in reality it has its origins in the South. And
Mm.
that's something that's an example of how we learn a narrative, that's wrong. 'Cause it's just not true. Like the Pilgrims, that was 1620. They didn't even name it Plymouth Rock. John Smith, the captain of the Susan Constant or the Discovery, one of the three ships that came that landed in the James River in 1607. John Smith was the one who supposedly went to the thing with Pocahontas, when Pocahontas supposedly saved his life. That all happened along the James River. Actually, that probably didn't happen at all. He probably was lying. Because, ironically, John Smith had also been captured and sold as a slave prior to coming to Virginia. He was captured by the Barbary pirates, and he told a similar story about how he was about to be killed and some Muslim lady saved him. So that's probably a lie. But he was actually ransomed, and somebody bought paid for his freedom and all that shit. But that actually happened to him, as far as the slavery didn't go. But he's the one who named Plymouth Rock. He named it Plymouth Rock. And the Pilgrims, they had originally went to I think Denmark, you know, and then they left Denmark and came to the New World. But they were a very aggressive cult religiously. You know what I'm saying? They were pretty fucked up. But again, that's just like the focus of the country. That was a minor thing. The Virginia Company was the mobilization of the company. It was Barbados, Virginia, and later South Carolina that were the primary engines of um, early British and English British exploits in the New World. And then, later Jamaica came a little later. Now, once you got that sugar lockdown in Jamaica and Barbados, that's money. And then you try to do it in South Carolina, and you also introduce indigo, because tobacco was up and down, you know what I'm saying? But once you get that rice in South Carolina, you could feed yourself. You could export rice, so it's money. It's money. You know what I'm saying? But And then, like I said, the joy, it's just fascinating. It's like, to be honest, like if I think I would love to do it with you. You know, we could like go like every decade. You know what I'm saying? To kind of understand how this shit developed. You know, during the time. You know what I mean? Like, like what happened between, 1750. You know, because 1750 was the height of the transatlantic slave trade coming into um coming into America. You know what I'm saying? That's when the bulk, like you hear us say a lot of times, like, we've been here for 400 years. And not really. I mean, there were black people here. You know, of course, it's early 1619. People like to say the 1526 thing. I get it. In South Carolina, I get it. In Florida,
Mm-hmm.
I actually get it. But as far as a line of continuation, we could say 1619. But 1619, it was about 300 people in the colony, in the Virginia colony, in the Jamestown colony. You had Jamestown and you had Henricus. Henrico was founded in 1611. Jamestown 1607. It's right up the James River. So like Henrico, that area that's Henrico is now the city of Richmond. But at the time, that was Henrico. That was Henrico County. But you had only a few, small colonies, what I'm saying? It wasn't anything major by 1619. But so the trade began to grow. It grew from that point. Like 1630, you had a few hundred, and but around the late 1600s when the Royal African Company formed, I think in 16, I don't want to say the exact date, but it's in the mid 1600s when the Royal African Company formed. That's when you start making money, and then when the Royal African Company lost this monopoly is when the trade really picked up because you had independent companies going into it and they went into something that was already set out. The government had already established these trading posts. You had trading posts in the River Gambia. That's the famous Kunta Kinte Island now, but at the time it was called St. James Island. And then you had the ports at Elmina, the English, the British rather, had taken over those ports. A lot of the older Portuguese ports along the west coast, the northwest, the Sahel region, and around the Bight of Biafra, you have more British contacts in those areas. And that's when the trade blew up. So the majority of our ancestors, like we may descend from people who came here before prior to 1730, but the majority of our ancestors certainly got here between 1750 and 1800. The vast majority
Mm-hmm.
because that's when the influx, you have more people in on the trade. It was big money to the point that one reason they wanted to end the prohibit the bringing in Africans was because South Carolina was getting to the point where it was way too black, and in Thomas Jefferson notes on the state of Virginia, he complained about too many black people being in Virginia, and they had to think of a way to get black people out of Virginia. It was far too many, and it was about almost 400,000 in 1800. There's about 125,000 in Maryland, 200,000 in North Carolina, and another 230 some thousand in South Carolina at that time. But with the total population of South Carolina, it was proximity. Proximity wise, it was more blacks in South Carolina. When you look at how many whites, you see what I'm saying? When you put it up against the entire population, Virginia was far more populated at the time, far more populated and far more a lot older money type thing at that time. You know what I'm saying? Until now, to be honest. But you had in just that area in Georgia, you had like 80,000. Because again, that was only northern Georgia at that point. You didn't go all the way down to Atlanta until later. And this is the 1800s. And this is 1800, and that's the census. So it's quite a few had grown. But see, that's the thing. We'll say like only 366,000 came here. It's not like they all came at one time. You know what I'm saying? They came throughout, what, 150-year period. We
Mm-hmm.
got to understand that. To understand the gravity and how it works, you know what I'm saying? They didn't all come at one time. They didn't all come to one place, nor from one place. You know what I'm saying? But the largest importers were in the United States was South Carolina, Charleston.
Mm.
Beyond that, yeah,
Well, you
man.
know what? That makes sense because you know, South Carolina was like one of before it was a colony, right? That
Uh,
was like one of the first area when the very first slaves came over here with the Spanish.
yeah, with the Spanish,
A lot of
right?
people don't know that Carolina was ran by the Spanish people. As a matter of fact, the word Carolina, it came from the Spanish.
Well, it's King Charles. Well, it was named after Prince Charles, the Carolingian. You know what I'm saying? When we get to talking fancy and when we speak English, we often use the Latin pronunciation. So Carolingian Carlos is, the English rendition is Charles. Yeah. But yeah, it was one. That's why if you look at the map between
Hmm.
Virginia and North Carolina, you see it's a straight line. See what I'm saying? It's because of the way it was officially designated to not be Virginia. So that's
Hmm.
why the line's so straight. It's straight line. But
Well,
when you look at
speaking of Carolinas, I always wondered this. Maybe others may have a question. Do you ever wonder why there was always a North Carolina, South Carolina? Why it could never be a one Carolina?
that was actually one Carolina initially.
Hmm.
There was actually one Carolina. I forgot when they split. I think like God damn it. I should know this too. And you told me to goddamn read up. My bad. I can't remember the exact date, the exact year. But it was one Carolina. And,
Hmm.
and initially North Carolina was populated by similar to Georgia. Because North Carolina and Georgia are kind of similar in that extent because you have people who the coast in North Carolina is not as conducive as, say, South Carolina. You know what I'm saying? As far as a harbor, you have the Herreras Islands. You know what I'm saying? Which is like the straight south of Virginia, Virginia Beach, that area. You do have that, but the main influx that would have came from the sea coming into North Carolina would have come from Virginia from the north and from South Carolina from the south. And that's why North Carolina is very unique in that it's the home of um the most dialects, like accents, you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Because of the different peoples moving in the area, because you had people coming down that were imported from places, tobacco cultivators. After a while, initially, when Africans were first brought over here to be enslaved, they were initially from Angola and the Congo. Let's put that out there, with a few
Hmm.
from the region of Ghana. But as the trade grew, like I said, when the British controlled those ports around the Bight of Biafra, which is modern day Benin, Togo, Nigeria, that where Africa has an underarm, so to speak, that little area. When the British men came from there, the majority of the people would have came from that area. We came from they would come out of the Oyo or the Dahomey. So it was controlled by the Yoruba and the Fon. That's why so many of us that descend from Igbos, because the Igbos was kind of caught up in the flux between those two groups, a power struggle between those, the Fon and the Yoruba. You know what I'm saying? So the Igbos, they was pounced upon by those two groups and others. You know what I'm saying? But at that time, you got people coming. They were going specialty especially, you have people who were already familiar with tobacco cultivation. Tobacco was one of the major trade commodities that the English, that the British and Europeans used when they traded with Africans. Africans had began to cultivate their own tobacco. Africans had began to cultivate their own tobacco and their own corn. That's one thing that we don't talk about either. Like when you look at, like, say, as far away as Shaka, Shaka Zulu, as far away as South Africa, and that's on the eastern part of South Africa, at that Zululand, corn had reached that far that it bolstered their population, just being a staple crop and so easy to grow. So, I mean, this is a world trade thing. That's what I'm saying. Like, when you have people that deny history, you can't explain why these things happen. You can't explain without the actual history.
Exactly.
You see this boost and you see this new trade good coming to what I'm saying? And that was another thing they don't talk about with the Zulus is they disrupted the slave trade on the east coast of Africa because they didn't participate in it.
Mm.
You know, they didn't participate in it. And they could have. They
Hmm.
easily could have. They would have been very good at it because people were already scared to death of it during the infantine period. You know what I'm saying? People were terrified of it. I mean, rightfully so. Rightfully so. Like any other tyrant. You know what I'm saying? That the history is known. If you're on the odd side of him, It's a problem, and that's what it was. But yeah, that's just I'm just saying how trade works. You had tobacco being cultivated in the Senegambia region. You had tobacco being cultivated Guinea-Bissau. You had tobacco being cultivated in Nigeria. And so you bring in people who know how to cultivate tobacco. It makes sense. You bring in people off the rice coast from Sierra Leone, these Mindi people, you take them to South Carolina. Because that's African rice that was grown in South Carolina. That's not some uh, American version of rice. That's African rice. That's grown in South Carolina. That rice that we get out of South Carolina to this day comes from an African strain of rice. It comes from the rice coast of Africa, which is modern day Sierra Leone. Um, Liberia is also included in that area. So people came, they would actually want people who were already, knowledgeable of the particular crop. And that wasn't always the case, but it did happen. It did happen. Like so you would have slaves, it would be advertised, they're from this coast, the rice coast, you know. I've read a good book on the slave trade is Marcus Redica's. It's called Marcus Redica. It's called the slave ship.
What's
And in that book,
what's the
he was
name of the
highlighting
author?
Marcus Redica.
Marcus Rediker.
Yeah, two D's,
Okay.
Reddker,
Marcus
Redica.
RDDI.
Uh-huh.
No, oh, how do you spell it?
K-E-R.
RIDDR?
Uh, Redica, Riddikerer.
K
E-R.
K E R.
I know I say that messed up. R. Romeo.
Oh,
Yeah,
Marcus Rediker. Okay, Rediker.
yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah.
And
He
the
a
name
good
of the book that he wrote was The Slave
slave
Ship.
ship. Yeah, it's a good book. But
Okay, all
yeah,
right.
in the book, he was pointing out how like people on slave ships were actually at times given tobacco to calm them, and because it was something they already did. You have African pipes that Africans made in Africa that you find in America. The style, the way they made their particular pipes, the way the Africans made the pipes for themselves. Because when we talk about this trade, again, we're talking about something that took place over hundreds of years. So if you bring in tobacco's been in Africa as early rather as the 16th century. It was used as a trade commodity. So by the 1700s, that's 200 years. You know what I'm saying? It was firmly in the zeitgeist in the existence of those coastal Africans at least, and used as a trade commodity by Africans as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot more to it, but it's so that's the problem, with these folk when they talk all this shit. It's like, um, you believe the narrative, and to be quite honest, I don't think people understand the narrative enough to dispute it because there's so much more to what you're taught in school. There's so much more to it. It's not as cut and dry. It's not as cut and dry as, oh well, we didn't have guns or some bullshit like that. Like they could not take over Africa. That wasn't even possible. That wasn't possible until like 300 years after first contact, and that was due to various reasons. They like to say it's the quinine, which is a drug that was developed in South America actually. Um, but it was more the machine gun. It was more the Gatling gun than it was the damn quinine. You know what I'm saying? Like the French just ripped through the Ashanti. I mean,
So
the French ripped through the Fawn, the Dahomey. The English ripped through the Ashanti. Yeah.
so now I have a question about the West Coast and the other areas of the United States that were considered as, unterritorial, or they weren't
Hmm.
territories yet per
Hmm.
se. It was in the process of being purchased. Now, was that more of the Union, or that was more of the Confederate when it came to the purchase of the West Coast? And
It was like it was done at the time when it was one country. So
okay.
that's what they were doing. Like this is where the whole Mason-Dixon line shit come from. Because they
Mm-hmm,
were trying to make a dividing line during the Missouri Compromise. Like that straight line that I spoke about in
mm-hmm,
Virginia, between Virginia and North Carolina.
mm-hmm.
That straight line would be like part of the demarcation. Like you wouldn't have anywhere. north of that, besides Virginia and Maryland and Missouri. Because the line goes all the way to Missouri. When you look at how they, you know what I'm saying, 'cause Missouri Compromise was, Missouri's going to be a slave state, but Kansas isn't. And then you have bloody Kansas. You have bloody Kansas because you had all these white folks moving from the East Coast, moving into these areas, this new frontier town. They just cleared out all these Indians. They get all this new land and land grants, but they, your common everyday white man, has to compete with a powerhouse of slave owners, and they didn't want to compete with them, because the slave owners could come in and take over the entire and take over anything that's there because they have the workers with them. Whereas, a man moving out there with his family, he can't compete against a slave owner.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole bloody Kansas thing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, again, it's very interesting and it's an intriguing thing, and it's unfortunate that we have been kind of lulled to the point that we just look at history as something that happened, as opposed to looking at history as the foundation upon which we stand, which it is.
Right, right, right. Um, so, and I also have a question. How is that? What did the concept of West Virginia come from?
Yeah.
The state of West
It,
Virginia.
it's a concept that shouldn't
You got West
exist.
Virginia.
I will speak as a true a true red-blooded member of the Commonwealth. Um, like we don't look at West Virginia like it's a real thing. But what really happened is the people there. West Virginia is still one of the poor states in the Union, but the area,
Oh,
those
it's a
areas there,
state. West
yeah,
Virginia is a
yeah,
very important state.
yes, yes,
Oh
yes,
wow. And Carter G. Woodson is from there.
yeah. I know we like to claim him as being from Virginia because West Virginia is not a real thing. So is Booker T. Washington.
Oh,
Um,
Booker T. Washington from West Virginia.
yeah, Booker T. Washington from West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Oh, you
your
know
boy
what? He
Skip
is
Gates from West
right. You're
Virginia.
right.
Yeah, but we say Virginia. You know what I'm saying? But you didn't have as many because of the if you haven't been to West Virginia, you understand, but it's very hilly. You know what I'm saying? You had coal deposits. You had black folks working in the coal before you had white people working in the coal mines, to be honest. You know what I'm saying? And that's another thing. They didn't want that aspect out there either. They didn't want to compete with people who own slaves and bringing in that labor force to take away from the labor force of the poor whites who existed in the area. I have family, they're from Waynesboro County in Stanton, Virginia, which is pretty close to West Virginia. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? But yeah, out there, like it's not as the land is not as arable as it is in in the Piedmont area, which is where I live. Richmond's in the Piedmont, then you had the Tidewater. That's more of a mountainous area. That's close to the Appalachian, the Appalachian Trail and all that shit. You know what I'm saying? The Appalachian is the oldest mountain form in the New World. I think it's one of the oldest mountains in the world, period. Yeah, I
Mm.
think it is. Yeah. But yeah, it's beautiful. West Virginia is gorgeous. If you ride out there, you know what I'm saying? You catch it. You know what I'm saying? But it's poor. And West Virginia,
Wow.
Mississippi, they like
Yeah.
West
Well,
Virginia,
yeah.
Mississippi, they go back and forth with the being the poorest.
Yeah.
They
Because
really do.
Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, like you said, West Virginia. Yeah.
Yeah, they broke away. I mean,
Being
because yeah,
being the
they
states in the
yeah,
United
they
States.
didn't want like Richmond's pretty far from West Virginia. Richmond being the capital is pretty far.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just controlled by the people on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want to be controlled by the people on the coast. It went to their best interest. But I tell you what, West Virginia is far from something happening for black folks. That's one of the more outwardly racist places I've ever been. And I'm from the South, so I've dealt with it my whole entire life. But West Virginia is one of those places where there's not a lot of black people. You know what I'm
Um.
saying? So they might be a
Now I
bit
know
more
they have a
brazen
housing
about it.
project named after Carter
Oh,
G. Woodson out there.
it's black people there. It is
Hmm.
black people there. I met a few. They talk funny, but I met a few.
You say
They
they
have a
talk funny.
yeah, they got a very unique accent.
Oh.
Yeah, they do.
Oh.
And it's kind of, oh, it. it sounds it's hard to listen to, honestly. Well, I'm kind of arrogant about West Virginia, like I really don't like it, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Nah, I mean for real, like I like the football team. My homeboy went to college out there, so it ain't nothing like that. And I've been out there a few times. West Virginia, but it's really a different area. It's more Ohio. It's more the Midwest than it is the I say the true South is being like, you know, Virginia on down. You know what I'm saying? It's not. It's more like Ohio. And Ohio is
Oh.
pretty racist as well. Ohio is very racist actually. But yeah, I like
Tell
yeah,
me
it
about it.
is. Yeah, yeah, dang, ain't you from Ohio? Your
Yeah,
family
that's
moved?
so yeah, that's where I was born. Yeah, I was
Mm-hmm.
born in Ohio and I grew up in Georgia. Um yeah, I came to the South when I was 3 years old. So yeah, I was born up there. But
So it's
yeah, I know I didn't get a
yeah,
chance to go back up there until I was 11. And
yeah,
no one ever warned me that, Ohio or just the North period, they have a
yeah, it was
certain
racist, right?
attitude
Yeah.
towards people in the South.
Yeah,
Like,
we had this I remember thinking, as late as my late teens, early 20s,
hmm
I remember thinking that people up north were more uh informed. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew a couple of cats from Philadelphia that didn't eat pork or some shit. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of believed in that fiction, but no, one, that's not true. And two, it's extremely racist in the north. It's extremely to be quite honest, like it because it's not as many black people, it's easier to kind of segregate people in ghettos and stuff. And they don't realize that, they just all happen to live together for a reason. It's kind of easier to do the redlining, with a larger white population
hmm
in places like the South. You're going to eventually leak through, like
hmm
in places like Atlanta, in places like Columbia, in
hmm
places like Savannah. The black people going to eventually from the hinterlands, coming from those country areas, they're going to eventually come into the cities and work. And that's what happened. That's another thing. We say the Great Migration. The Great Migration is like, people move to the north for opportunities. That's true. But people move to the cities for more opportunity, not just the north. You know
hmm
what I'm saying? They move to the cities in the South as well. And that's something that's not much talked about, because it kind of paints this picture of a more liberal North, where the country was fractured and, you had a group of people who were not adverse to the advancement of the Negro, blah, blah, blah. When in reality, the North ain't, you didn't have that. They didn't give a shit. They use blacks as well as a scapegoat to make themselves solidify themselves into an American people. That's what's
hmm
been done with us throughout history here, not around the world. I hate when we make this a
Yeah,
worldwide phenomenon.
that blacks moved over there to the West Coast from the South.
Yeah, black people, yeah, they moved to the West Coast as well. When they moved during the Great Migration, they moved to the West Coast as well. They moved to California. You know what I'm saying? Um, black people couldn't go to Oregon for a while. The black population in places like Seattle and
hmm
Tacoma is due to military bases by and large. The military bases, people move out there and stay. Fort Lewis, where's Fort Lewis? You got Bremerton Naval Yard, and I think some Air Force base too. But I was stationed in Fort Lewis in
hmm
Washington State in Tacoma, and that was my first time truly understanding my minority status in this country because I'm from the South, so it's more black people. I grew up around black people. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, but when I go out there, like it wasn't like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like one. I think in Tacoma, it was like one neighborhood, Hilltop, that was like black people.
Mm.
All black. That's the only one I knew of. It was another one like with the dude, John Muhammad, the DC sniper, where he lived in Tacoma. But that was more of a mixed area. But there were black people there. But it was black people few and far between. Seriously, I couldn't wait to get back home. You miss your
Mm.
people when you don't have them. Yeah, you do. Can't even get a good haircut type thing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Can't get a
Yeah.
good haircut or those good macaroni and cheese to save your life. You'd be happy you found somewhere. But if you find somewhere up there, the person he's from the South. You know what I'm saying? He's
Yeah.
from the South somewhere. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
I
saying?
mean,
But
or if you find some good soul food, more than likely
yeah,
it's somebody from the South.
yeah, somebody from the South. Yeah, yeah.
More
It
than
was a
likely.
few little
Uh,
DJs I remember they had the chicken gizzards and stuff, you know what I'm saying? And that was a big deal to them. But you
mm-hmm.
know, you can get them anywhere in the South, you know what I'm saying? That's a big deal. That's, I think that was one of the only places they had up there when I was in Tacoma. But you know, like as far as black people moving all over the country, it's something that's it's ongoing to be honest, but it's something that happened. And I think, unfortunately, we don't recognize that even. Anytime I meet people, black folk from California, who tell me that they actually descend from some fictitious tribe of Indians who lived there under Queen Khalifa. You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous, man. I'm like, dude, your family's from Mississippi. No question. You know, like, come on, dude. You from Mississippi, right? Your family came from Mississippi. Like Snoop family. I served in Korea
Hmm.
with one of their family members, and he was from Macomb, Mississippi. I think he's their uncle. I served with him. Um, I know he's Brandy and Ray J's uncle. I remember that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I know because
but
Snoop Dogg and
they
Brandy and them,
cousins.
they all related to each other, and they all
Mm,
from Mississippi.
yeah, they from Macomb,
Mhm.
Mississippi. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? And
he grew up
Macomb was
in
a slave trading town. Macomb developed off the plantation. They developed that.
LA.
And again, like when I say like when we say Mississippi, our connectivity with Mississippi is that people from Mississippi were sold from here to there. Not only was that the case, but the white people who settled in Mississippi were from here in Georgia and other places that were more established at the time. You know, this was like a land lottery type thing when those territories were acquired. You know what I'm saying? It was a rush. You had people like Jefferson Davis, you know, the president of the Confederacy. His family's from Virginia, but they moved to South Carolina. I mean, excuse me, they moved to Mississippi and became millionaires off of cotton. And so
Mm.
you had entire plantations move as well. You know, where you have a plantation, like say someone owns a plantation in North Carolina, that person could buy land in Mississippi and take all the people on his plantation with them. That happened as well. But that was a very tumultuous time, and we don't discuss it enough. Like the domestic slave trade is not discussed enough. And whenever like someone comes to me, they're like, "Well, slavery wasn't all that bad," or I'm like,
Yeah,
"Dude,
and that's the ignorant mindset. You can't
yeah,
say that if you wasn't there to experience it.
yeah, man,
You
like
may
more
not
than
think
eight
it's
hundred
bad because
thousand
you're an
people."
outsider, but for somebody who have gone through it,
Yeah, I
they
mean,
look at it as bad because of
you
what they
had,
had to deal with, the pain, the trauma,
yeah,
all of that that came along with it.
yeah, you had people like after slavery. After emancipation, you had newspapers and stuff that came out black. I gotta look up the name of this one in particular, but you had a lot of ads where people would put in their information because they had been sold and they were trying to get back to their family. You know, like one of the big fictions we believe is you had to take the name of your former slave owner. That's not true. You could choose whatever name you wanted. No one really cared what you said your name was, especially at that time, because these things were taken down by Union occupiers of the South at the time. You know, part of the Freedmen's Bureau. You know, so it's not like anyone in the South or any former plantation owner would have anything. You know, any way that he could control what you did at that particular point. A lot of people maintained those names so they could be found by their relatives who had been sold away. So, you
Mm.
know, if you do your genealogy, you could find somebody, say in New Orleans, and he lives on a plantation that's a Smith plantation, but his name is Jackson when he come off the plantation because he could have been sold down there and he maintained that name Jackson because that's the plantation he came off of. There was a connection. You know, that was the connection. They had like people who put ads in the paper, looking for relatives and stuff. It was real. It was real. And we still here. And that's the part we miss when we want to be kings and queens and pharaohs and space cadets and all this bullshit. You know, we don't sit around and realize the strength and the perseverance of our ancestors that allow us to even be here You know,
I'm still trying to get my genealogy together. It's pretty tough. I'm gonna be honest about it. It's very tough because it's a lot that
Mhm.
really goes into it. I would have to find somebody to help me. But
Is your family
I,
from Ohio? I mean, where
huh?
they from? They from
Who?
Ohio?
Who?
Your family. Are they from Ohio?
So no, no. Okay, my family,
Mm,
my mother's side of the family. My mother was born in Detroit, Michigan.
mm.
She was born in Detroit, and the
And what year?
complicated thing, huh?
What year? Around
She
what
was
year?
born in 1959.
Okay. Oh, yeah, your mama, your young mama. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the complicated thing about that is she was adopted. So the
Oh,
people
yeah,
that
yeah.
adopted her, they was from Mississippi. They from Greenwood, Mississippi.
Mm,
Yep. And then
mm.
my father is from Georgia, from Atlanta. All right, but his family goes back to Georgia and Florida, and to my knowledge, the Caribbean. Yeah,
That's
but
possible.
hmm but yeah. So when I did my ancestry test, right, my 23andMe especially, it shows you know how it shows your diaspora,
Yeah,
the African diaspora. So it shows my diaspora as far as Georgia is concerned, right? It shows the Georgia, what they call it, the Georgia Plain, something like
yeah.
that.
Also,
So
like it'll say early Georgia African
yep,
American.
right. So that
Okay.
would cover Georgia, Florida, and I think somewhere in the region you could see like Carolina up there.
Yeah, you gonna see North Carolina. You gonna see South Carolina. If you from Georgia,
Carolina. Yep.
yeah. If you're from, matter of fact, if you're
And then
from like
and
Jacksonville, North Carolina, down, you're gonna see South Carolina.
oh yeah,
Okay.
and then in ancestry, I saw where uh it shows like Mississippi, and it shows Georgia and Virginia, and of
Hmm.
course Carolina, yep, and Alabama somewhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, I tell everybody, because me being from Virginia, when I talk Virginia, it's kind of sound like I'm just bigging up my place, but that's not the case. You know what
nah,
I'm saying? Because I was always told this when I was younger. You know what I'm saying, by people, older people here, but I didn't understand it. That's like this the root, like this the root. I mean, old people used to always tell me that when they say root, like the older people say root instead of root.
mm,
That's the root right here. Like
yeah,
you don't even know, and I didn't understand, what they meant by it. But I will say this: when I went in the military, when I went in the army, and it gets cold here, and we are part of the uh we're not part of the northern metroplex like New York. We're not.
right,
We're
right,
not close enough to it. You know what I'm saying? But we are affected by it. Just the media itself. We're affected by it. So,
mm-hmm,
like, say when I went in the army, like the way I dressed and stuff, it was more like somebody from, like, I guess we would say East Coast back then. But it was weird because like when it came to my sensibilities and how I act, and I got along much better with, you know, everybody else from the South. It was weird. You know what I'm saying? Because I would have on Tim's and all that shit, back when that wanted, the shit down in the South.
uh-huh.
But it was the shit here. You know what I'm saying? But like people acting like I'm from New York, and I used to get very offended, and they couldn't understand
Oh,
why. Because that was like a compliment, from some angles, but from somebody from I don't know about. Well, I can speak for Newport News because my homeboy from Newport News was the same way. So I can get it up to 757 that go. But nah, we ain't play that shit. Like,
well, yeah,
nah.
and then like going back to my experience, like when I lived up yonder in Ohio, right?
Hmm.
And whenever they hear my southern accent, because when I was coming up as a kid, my accent was much stronger than this. It was
I
much
bet it
stronger.
was.
It was much stronger. It was much stronger. But
Right.
yeah, when I had a very very strong Georgia accent, right? I was about 11 years old. Um, the people up there, they'll look at me funny. They say, "Oh, why you talk like that?" And then someone will say, "Oh, you sound slow." And I like I said, I was just too young to understand it. My mother couldn't stand it because again, my mother was from Detroit. So
Right.
So she couldn't stand it. She couldn't stand my accent. And she was like, I can't stand the way you talk. You get to sound like your old daddy and them. You get to sound all country and stuff. Why you talk like that? And I mean, it just bothered her. And then I was like, well, I can't help the way that's what what do you expect? I grew up in Georgia. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
was raised in Ohio. I
but
don't know
again,
Ohio
you
like.
see, do you see how that is trying to distance yourself, and not
Right.
yourself, but
Where I realized that comes from how the Europeans used to do each other,
yep,
because
yep.
the white folks down in the South used to call the white folks up north the Yankees, and then the Yankees, I mean, I say Yankees, the white people up north used to call the whites down here in the South a bunch of hunkies.
The monkey comes from. My phone might mess up, so
Okay,
just work. Monkey comes from the
Cujo,
north.
Cujo, Cujo. Uh oh,
Uh,
uh oh.
horn back in the day, it didn't beep beep like it does now. It hunked.
Yeah.
Honk. You know what I'm saying? So that's why the term honky became used for whites. And it was because of white people coming into black neighborhoods for prostitution. So it's not really even an insult. It's kind of weird. It just got popularized due to Jefferson. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
I'm not that old to remember the Jeffersons coming on regular. I think I might remember it coming on regular, but I
Mhm.
certainly watched it, in syndication.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, honking. Yeah, there's a honking horn. Yeah, so like cracker, the term cracker, that's not an insult that black people made up against white people. The
Mm.
whip cracker thing, that's not true. Cracker is just a term for a poor white person.
Mhm.
Like sailors, in the Navy were called cracker jacks. And
Mhm.
black sailors were called black jacks. And that's
Mhm.
why you get a box of cracker jacks. It's a little
I
sailor
used to
on the
love
box.
eating the Cracker Jacks
Yeah,
popcorn.
I still like them.
That was
The
my
little
favorite.
tribes and shit.
Yeah, I used to
You
go to the
know?
just get those.
That's the
Yeah.
first thing I bought when I got my teeth fixed was some Cracker Jacks.
Yeah. Whenever my grandma used to send me to the corner store, right, to go pick up some stuff for her, the first thing I grab is some Cracker Jacks.
That's still my shot. I
Yeah.
feel it. I try to get the kids
Yeah,
to
I
have
didn't
them.
know that. I didn't know they had something to do with the sailors, as
Yeah,
far as
it's
the
a
term
sailor.
cracker is concerned.
Just a book called Blackjack too. I don't know who wrote it. I read it like
Uh-huh.
years ago, but it was like about how the black sailors who worked from Charleston, all
Uh-huh.
the way up to what's the name of it? Massachusetts. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, it's a lot. It's not like, we were just slaves, but I too black. I think that it's unfortunate that we don't realize how our culture developed in the situation.
Uh-huh.
Like I think that it's I understand recognizing that, you know, we were kings and queens and all that shit. I understand it. But this culture, that these people that we are now, right
Uh-huh.
now,
Uh-huh.
is the result of slavery in America. I mean, our genetic composure, you know what I'm saying? Our culture. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And denial ain't gonna help it.
Sure ain't.
Running from it ain't gonna help it. We need to stop running from it.
It sure ain't. I mean, it's not. It's not gonna help you. I mean, I tell people like this: if you want to understand the concept of slavery, right, you gotta go to the root. You gotta go to the root. If you're gonna talk about slavery, you gotta go to the root. That means you
Yeah.
gotta go back to your ancestor land to understand what took place. You
Hmm.
gotta go to the root of it. If you don't deal with the root, then you can't really discuss slavery. You can't even have the conversation without talking about the root.
Yeah, when I asked somebody, I was doing this little mentorship program a while back, years ago now, and it was like we got into the whole not snitching conversation. I'm like, where do y'all think that came from? And everybody's, like,
What? Yeah. Where the concept of no snitching came from?
yeah, where it come from? It come from slavery because we knew we can't tell them, we can't be on their side at any cost. We'll
Mm-hmm.
never tell on each other at any
Mm-hmm.
cost. Where and it's weird because it made that divisive, us being divisive towards them for our own survival. Like there's no shame in lying to them. It don't matter. I remember growing up and hearing that, like you can't steal from a white person. You know what I'm saying? You can't, don't worry about that because whatever you take from them probably already yours, and that's a bit much. I can get how that sounds now, but
Mm-hmm.
when you have people who was literally scratching and surviving, you know what I'm saying? Nobody's gonna tell. No, excuse me. Nobody's gonna tell who stole the chicken. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's
Right.
gonna tell. Nobody's gonna tell. That shit That's part about it. That's why we so big on it because they've been viewed and they've been an authority. So you don't concede to the authority to go against your people. That's where
Mm-hmm.
snitching thing come from. It comes from slavery. I was on TikTok and
Mm-hmm.
there was some guy. He was pretty popular. I can't remember his name, but he was like saying how black people never had any cohesion. I was like, Yes, we did." And unfortunately, it was during slavery and right after slavery because all we had was each other to depend on. That's why we developed these languages and the way we talk and the way we address each other. Like I remember in the army, like white people would always say, because we could be anywhere, and I see another black dude, I'm gonna nod at him. Like, do you know it? Do you guys like know it? Each other like, nah. But we acknowledging each other because that's something that comes from slavery.
Right.
Because we recognize at that point that was all we had. That's why I get on people when they say shit like if they have a slave mentality. We don't know those people's mentality. Those people who were actually slaves, we don't know their mentality. We think they just sat around and waited on being freed and all this shit.
Mm-mm.
We've taken the hook and bait like this as if we were complacent, as if we just, you know, went along with it. We don't think about how the whole trope of black people being lazy, that comes from slavery. Because niggas act like they didn't know how to do shit, so they wouldn't have to do shit. You know what I'm saying? Like when you read the narrative, man, like I got one narrative. He was talking, they in the gang working together, and he was like, "Look, you're gonna stop working like white people over here. We got to get this shit done, because you're doing it half-ass, because you don't want to do more. It's like you fighting back in the small ways that you can, in the small ways that you can fight back. You know what I'm saying? And one thing that I kind of fell off because I wanted to say this. One thing, like after emancipation, that was really messed up that I don't think we talk about enough either is there was with the likes of the Ku Klux Klan, there was mass terrorism against black people because black people had no type of way of recourse. No voice of recourse. There was no law to protect you, and at least during slavery, you had the protection of your plantation owner. You see what I'm saying? You had the protection of the plantation owner pretty much protected you from the poor whites.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because you, you, they could do something to you, but they damaging this man's property. You see what I'm saying? So after that point, when that was no longer the case, people were abused, and these poor whites got to be the prison guards, and when debt peonage came into the picture. The last actual slave in the United States was freed in 1941. The last actual slave was freed in 1941, and he was
And
held
who was
as a
that?
debt. forget his name. I forget. I got his.
Where
I
was he from?
apologize, sis. It was in Texas.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, it was in Texas. I forget his
Maybe I
name.
could look up his name. You said the
Yeah,
last slave that was
yeah,
freed.
the last slave that was actually free. And one of the things that brought attention to the debt peonage system, one was a white boy got caught up in it and he died, so his family went crazy. And two, the Japanese were attacking America abroad. Not militarily, but with propaganda saying how America.
Oh, his name was Alfred Irvin. That was his name.
Okay. Oh,
Alfred
word.
Irvin.
Was I right about the year? Was it 1941?
1942,
All
and
right, my
at a
bad.
farm
See,
near Beeville, Texas.
yeah, word. Yeah, the
Hmm.
last actual slave. Yep. So I mean, we can't think about this shit like it's so far away. Like you had so many women who were sexually assaulted.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? In these rural areas by these poor white men. You know, and I hate when we have these discussions and we want to bring that up. I've actually talked to dudes. They be like, "Well, men got raped too." Yeah, it probably happened. You had child
You
molestation.
know,
But no, not neary. Ain't now,
I'm
ain't
not denying it, but
nowhere now
you
close.
know why that is. They because they're invalidating when
Yeah,
people
and it's
they
sad
try
because
to
the bottom line
invalidate.
is you descend from just as many women as you do men. This is not
Hmm.
like men are a separate species from women. Like I have just as many mothers as I do fathers. Just because I'm a man, I'm not any more related to my mother than I mean my father than I am my mother. Now
Hmm.
I'm not. Despite the fact I carry my father's Y chromosome with pride, BM181, that's Hadzabi too. So I can't even claim to be no Egyptian and none of that shit because that's a hunter gatherer. It's still hunter gatherer.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, come on. But we tend to look at it like that. But that's a Christian way of looking at the world while we talking about people having slave mentalities and worshiping another man's God. To look at a woman and a man as two separate things is a Christian thing. That's not something that's universal.
Hmm.
That's a Christian thing. We get that from the Bible. And it's in Islam as well. Because Islam is itself to me a form of Christianity. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like, come on, man. Like women were terrorized. And these are our mothers. These are our mothers. These are our aunts. These women were terrorized. I mean, like
Hmm.
all throughout the country. You have places they had to get together and protect themselves. And we think, we see the drama behind it. We see the people getting drug off and lynched, and you don't see the resistance. But the resistance was there. Because if there was no resistance, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't
True.
exist without that resistance. We
True.
wouldn't resist unless somebody said, we're going to keep on doing it. We're going to keep on, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't exist, you know. But again, that's, well, I ain't say this yet, but I said it again. But the thing in America, one thing I noticed, I'm not a real big conspiracy person. I used to
Hmm.
be when I was
Hmm.
growing up. But if there's one conspiracy that I truly believe in, that I think I can present enough evidence to prove that's true, is um, how history is made to be viewed as unimportant.
Hmm.
Like I remember watching various sitcoms growing up. 227 comes to mind. I don't even know if you remember that,
Two two
but
seven. Yep, I remember that
yeah,
show.
yeah, it was they was complaining about how boring history is, and in school that was my favorite subject, so that it kind of bothered me. So I would always notice it when I would hear it being said. It's just a popular take how history is boring and blah blah blah. When no, bro, you gotta know. You're the product of it. I'm a gardener. I'm a gardener if I'm nothing else. And I gotta know what's going on with my soil when I plant my seed.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Those seeds coming out of something. I gotta kind of understand the soil. I'm growing in clay. It's good for me to know that I'm growing in clay. Because
Hmm.
one side of my garden, I got two sides of my yard. One is clay and one is more of a rocky, more rocky, more pebbles. But it's
Hmm.
right across. It's within 30 meters of each other. But
Hmm.
you gotta understand that foundation that you put your seed in. You don't just go out there and grow. But unfortunately, I think so many of us just believe the Western concept of being an individual, that we just happen to exist because of some cosmic force. Cosmic force indeed addressed sexually. But yeah, cosmic force. But yeah, it's like when you're taught not to view history as an explanation of the present, it's a problem. It's an absolute problem. You know, you have these people, these so-called racial realists. You know, you have it, especially you hear it a lot with the current GOP administration. They would say things like the genes of the people. We have very smart genes. His IQ is high and shit like that. You're measuring how successful a person is in a world that's completely made up. That's the measure of their cognitive ability or how successful they is in a world that's completely made up. This shit ain't real. You know what I'm saying? You tell me you take a person with 135 IQ, are they gonna survive if they left in the rainforest because of their 135 IQ? Is that gonna help? Are they gonna think of some configuration to keep mosquitoes from biting them? No. No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works.
Exactly.
Yeah, but they put so much emphasis on the genes. It's all in your genes. It's all in your genes. Nah, it's all in your culture. It's
Facts.
all in your culture. It's all in your
Facts.
culture.
Facts. Facts.
And
Facts.
our
Facts.
culture, our culture didn't develop in a vacuum. Our culture exists alongside white supremacy. So we adhere to it as well without even realizing it. We adhere to it. We do. We celebrate it. When we say things like pretty hair and pretty eyes, who the fuck made it pretty? Why is it pretty? You know what I'm saying? Who told you that it's pretty? And where you learn it from? And we learned it here. And it's like we kind of take it for granted because we look at the way we see the world as just the way it is, as opposed to,
Hmm.
we've been taught. Because indoctrinated is too strong of a word to hurt people's feelings. But we've literally been taught to view the world as we do. So you should question the narrative. But to question the narrative is one thing, but to just totally dismiss something you don't understand is dangerous. Or you haven't attempted to understand. It's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree. I really agree with you on that. I really agree. Wow. Melvin, I mean, brother
You can call
Cujo.
me Melvin. That's my name. I don't have no problem. That's my name.
Oh,
My name Melvin. I don't have no problem with that.
okay, bro. My bad, bro. So, brother, it's great having you on here. Well, you really going in with some knowledge, like you really putting some knowledge out there. So, before I close it out, right? What books do you recommend? It's still, the last of Black History Month. So,
Oh
what
yeah,
book
yeah.
do you recommend that people look up and read on, especially when it comes to like Black people, Black soldiers, Civil War, Black people, etc.?
Um, I gotta say this book because I love the book. It's a good book. It's called The Slave Community. It's written by man. His last name is Game. I forget his first name.
The Slave Community.
Slave Community. The Slave Community. Yeah.
Okay, and it's by John W. Blassingame.
Yeah, okay, but I need to know Game. I would have said Edward. Yeah, some Game. Um, Another one is ah, Franklin and Armfield. I forget the tag, but if you put Franklin and Armfield in, it'll come up. These were the two most successful domestic slave traders in the early 1800s. Isaac Franklin and what was Armfield? I always forget
What's
Armfield.
the name? What's the title of the book?
It's just put Franklin Armfield book. It should come up. I got the book. I got that damn book. Excuse me, because I got that book because I got it from the library and it got wet, so I had to buy it. They'll sell it to you for $20 though. That ain't bad. That's not a bad deal. I need to do that more.
And what it's called? What's how you spell his name again?
Ah, Franklin Armfield. Armfield is ARM Field, FIELD.
Arm,
Franklin
say
Armfield.
Armfield.
Yeah.
Okay,
Ah,
and
what's the name of the book? It's broke. It's the Ledger and the Chain.
the
Yeah.
legendary in the chain.
The Ledger and the Chain. Ledger and the Chain.
The ledger. Say the ledger.
Ledger, Ledger.
Oh, and the chain.
Yeah. I think that's the
Okay,
name.
okay, I see. Okay, I see the book.
Yeah. That's a really good book.
Okay, let me
That's a
let me
really good book.
let me go ahead and let me post that up to the people.
If you're from the Gulf, you could actually find your ancestors in that book. You may actually find your ancestors. If you're from the Gulf region, you could actually find your ancestors listed in that book.
All right, let me go ahead and open it up. All right, so the people can find it. And let's see,
Did you put the Marcus Rediker one up there too?
do who?
That's another one. The Marcus Rediker, the slave. Yeah, that's the book Legend of Chain. That's a good book, man. That's a really, really good book.
Let's see. I'm gonna show it to everybody. All right, the Legendary and the Chain. Okay.
Ledger, yeah, that's a really good book. Another one is Richmond Slave Auctions. Richmond, I can't
You
think.
said Marcus Let. What's his name again?
Marcus Rediker, Reddker.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Marcus.
yeah, put it up there. The slave
Oh,
ship.
what was that book called?
The slave ship.
The Slave Ship. Yeah, Slave Ship. All right, the Slave Ship. You post that. Oh, the Slave Ship. The Slave
And the
Ship.
reason I say these books are good for the Civil War thing is because it shows you how the Civil War and why it developed and the amount of finance that went into the decision of South Carolina to secede from the Union. It's money. It's
Okay.
money. And the slave population helped control the poor whites, ironically.
Wow. You
Yeah,
said help control the poor whites.
yeah, it helped control the poor whites. It allowed them to be policed,
For real?
because yeah, it allowed them to be policed. Not that black people did the policing, it's just that they were controlled by the people with money. It allowed the oligarchy to really control the area because, everyone would aspire to be that oligarch. So instead of, robbing people houses and stuff, you didn't do that. You thought that one day you could take that man's place. You know what I'm saying? It's
Wow.
more of a lulling you to sleep type thing. When the poor white population was living in sheer disgrace during the antebellum period. You know what I'm saying? Shit, you can read Huckleberry Finn for that. Like authors like Mark Twain, that's things when you really want to understand like the American ideal of the time. That's one of another good author. If you anyone who went to college, you done read what's the damn the plank the damn man, I'm forgetting the names, man. Those are not good names, but a lot of that early American literature, you'll see how this identity was formed, and this American identity is solely based on not being a nigga. That's how
Hmm.
come people could come here. They come here in a few generations, they're good because at least you're not black. You know what I'm saying? And then now we see the same thing with even the Africans. Because at least you're not a nigga. At least you're not one of us. But the thing about them is they can't really assimilate, past a few generations. I mean, they're gonna have to eventually assimilate,
Mm-hmm.
or they're gonna be white, or they're gonna, straight up. There's no other way. There's no way to avoid being treated like a black person unless you,
Right.
eventually turn white. That's just
Exactly.
it.
I mean, especially if you realize, if you study and realize that oh, you had ancestors that was brought here from the land that you came from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like I see the things with the little dudes, and they'll go to people in England, London, or whatever, and they'll be like, well, and then black. black British people would be like, well, where are you from in Africa? And like we don't know. But that just shows that they don't understand the history. Like they don't understand the history. How the hell would we know that? Like seriously, we could break it down from Senegambia to the Congo, and we'll pretty much be right. But that's a 3,000-mile area. You know what I'm saying? Of coastline.
Right.
That's a lot. And we're not just talking about the coast. We're talking about people who came from inside the continent. People were often forced march for hundreds of miles to reach the coast. So it's kind of rough when they say that, but it's like they really don't have an understanding of this history. That's why
A lot
like
of
you should
people don't.
proudly say
A
you're
lot of
from
us don't.
Georgia.
A lot of us don't have an understanding of the history in general. And I say it all the time that it's a lot more to slavery than what we know.
Man, there's
It's
so
so
much
much
more to it.
to it than what we know.
It is. I appreciate you having me, and I want you to invite me back. Don't take this long. This next
Okay
time.
then. All right then. Well, you already know. You can reach out to me when you're ready.
That's true.
And we can go from there. And
Hey, the
I'll reach
last
out
time I
to you.
talked to you, I was walking up the street and I seen a hawk catch uh uh a squirrel in the
Mm,
city. Yeah, in the
wow.
city. Like I had never seen no shit like that in the city. Like in the hawk, it had to be like 2 feet tall. I just remembering that day because I was walking up the street. But yeah, that was weird. But yeah, thank you for
It
having
was
me.
so well, so what did it mean to you when you saw the hawk catching a squirrel? What did it symbolize to you?
Well, I was afraid for the hawk because he was afraid. He didn't want to fly off with such a big prey with so many people walking around. But no one was paying attention to him. And
Mm,
it taught me, man, that that's what life is all about. Like life goes on. You got to make it happen.
yeah.
That hawk had to figure out a way to get out of that situation. Like nobody was really paying attention to it. And if anything, we were looking at it in awe. But it didn't know that. So it was very suspect, like looking at people as you walk by. I was like, I remember talking to you. You can listen to it. We can go back and listen to it. I was like, damn, I'm like 3 feet away from it. It wouldn't even fly away.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even fly away. But, eventually it did. But that was wow, man. I had never seen one like that. I
Right.
seen one touch a pigeon before, but I never seen them. Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, all right then. Well, I'll make sure I reach out to you next time, or you can reach out to me. But I do have some more subjects
Yeah. Any
that's
question,
gonna
I do better
cover.
with questions. If you ask me something, I can roll.
Yeah, I have some more subjects that we have to come up with that we need to discuss. So I'll make sure I keep you informed.
All right, I appreciate that. I
All
appreciate
right,
you.
then. You have a great
All right.
night.
You do
All
the
right.
same. Peace.
All right,
Big
then.
up
Peace.
Virginia.
All right. So I appreciate everybody coming in. That's a lot of information that we learned. You know what I'm saying? He covered it. He covered a lot about the Civil War, and then he went to the domestic slave trade. He went to all of that. So I hope you guys get a chance to check out the books that he recommended. I posted in the chat for all of you, so you guys can check it out for yourself. Okay. So there's a different list of books here. But yeah, as I was telling him, and I'm saying to you guys, there's a lot that we don't know about slavery, man. There's different eras of slavery. You talking about the slave trade, middle passage, triangular trade, domestic slave trade. It's a lot that goes into this. It's a lot. It's so much that we don't even know. It's so much that has to be unpacked. And then there's going to be some things that we'll never discover in our lifetime. You welcome. You welcome. Thank you for coming through watching. And shout out to the chat. I appreciate you guys so much. Shout out to my brother Asian. Let me give it up to my brother Asian Soldier. Shout out to you, brother. You know what I'm saying? Because, bro, you very solid. You very supportive. I mean, you always come through here. You know what I'm saying? You make sure you let it be known that hey, you one of the first people that come around. I appreciate your support. You know what I'm saying? You are a very solid brother. Please keep up with the good work. Continue to be that supporter that you are. I appreciate it. All right. Thank you, Donnie, for coming through. So, anyways, I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. And for those of you that celebrate Ramadan, if you just broke your fast, I hope you had a great Ramadan. I hope you guys was able to fast on today. You know, some people gonna start their Ramadan tomorrow. Some probably already started today. So I hope you guys enjoyed. One thing about fasting, it gives you that form of serenity. Fasting is a form of asceticism. So for those of you that don't know what asceticism is, that's basically like you're taking a break from the worldly activities and you focusing on purifying, being able to build a better relationship with your creator or whatnot. But basically you just learn how to be abstinence. Okay. And so fasting is a form of being abstinence from drinking, from eating a whole lot, and from indulging into sexual activity. So it's a beautiful thing. So if you can fast, do so. If not, then that's fine as well. But just process yourself and take consideration of your health and whatnot. So shout out to everybody that's fasting. Shout out to everybody that celebrated Juma. Friday's Juma. So, anyways, all right, peace, brother. I hope you enjoy it. I really do. So I hope that you able to find some form of peace and great solitude behind it. Go ahead and just enjoy your Ramadan with you and your family or whatnot. But dang, Ramadan came early, didn't it? It came on, it started today and it ends on the 29th of March. It came very early. But you see, with the Islamic calendar, it's very different because it's not like the Gregorian calendar, which we follow, right? You know what I'm saying? In the Islamic calendar, right, or the lunar calendar, they follow a rotation and it's centered around the moon cycle, basically. So, you know, the Ramadan might fall on a spring, it may fall on the summer, it may fall on the fall, you know what I'm saying? It depends. It may fall somewhere, but normally it falls somewhere around spring and summer. But anyways, you guys have a wonderful evening, and I'll make sure I keep you guys connected. Until next time, peace and power elevation. Salam alaikum to the brothers and sisters in the Islamic community. Ramadan Mubarak, Juma Mubarak, and I will talk to y'all later. All right.